technical difficulties, everyone. That was my fault. Had to get the camera situated correctly. But I'm Danielle Pierce, creator of Real Estate Profit Lab, talking to the wonderful attorney Ernest B. Fenton out of Chicago today. And we're going to be talking about, I don't know where this conversation is going to go, honestly, but I know it's going to be good. So with that being stated, how you doing today?
I'm good.
You're good. All right. Yeah. So I know about your body of work and how long you've been an attorney and the things that you do, but what do people need to know about you? Like how would you describe yourself?
Good Lord.
Like, how much time do we have?
How do I describe us? I'm ambidextrous. I tell people that I'm more than an attorney.
More
like
than an
really
attorney.
It's not, and I think that'll come out during the conversation that like it's more about the law. I'm an advocate for people. I'm about empowerment and knowledge and growth.
Okay.
So, I'm a change agent.
I like that, change agent. And what specifically do you, I mean, I know you see a lot of different things, but what do you think, what is most prevalent that you see in our communities? You do a lot of posts about people who are have not protected their assets when they died, or they've died and it's too late, or kids coming back to try to take stuff that's not theirs. So what needs to be protected the most?
You said our community. You talking about Black folks?
I'm talking about Black folks,
rich folk, poor folk,
all of them.
We wait, and we live in a Google world, and like Google is cool, but it doesn't tell you all the fine points. I think it's a great start, but it's not a good finisher. And so one of the things that we need to do, I think we've done a much better job at beginning things, but we're still not very good at closing out. And like your growth, your win or your loss occurs in the last 10%. So, what I'm seeing and what I have seen throughout my career, as an example, if you start with foreclosure, sort of what predated or what predated, if you will, foreclosure was somebody bought a house. You follow? So like we did real good because somebody bought something, but then somebody didn't know how to keep that something. Like we did real good because grandmama came from Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee. They moved to New York, the East Coast and Chicago, and we got some stuff, but we didn't do a real good job of keeping grandmama's stuff. So like, it's like the civil rights movement. I say like we did real good during the civil rights movement. We were great at moving from slavery to the civil rights movement and did what we did, Martin Luther King and all that, power to the Black people. We did real good, but we messed up during the transition from the civil rights movement. So like we got the education and the opportunity, but then we have not learned how to leverage it.
That is, first of all, we could spend the next hour talking about just that right there. Because I hear that, like I receive that as someone who has dealt with foreclosure personally, as someone who got my first corporate job and quote unquote thought I made it to the promised land. Yeah. I think it's because the benchmark is so low. So then we do get something, we like, well, shit, we good. We good forever. And then like you said, we can't hold on to it. Did you see that article where it talked about how even Black men who are born into families with money still have a high probability of losing that money?
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't see it, but I understand it.
You understand it?
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I think the issue is that we think that, I know somebody else had made a post about, you make six figures, you feel like you made it, you've made it.
Of course.
And it's like, we gotta, I think, do you agree with the sentiment that maybe we should start with, okay, maybe six figures is not the end goal here. Maybe we need to aim a little bit higher.
$1 million is not the end goal.
Yeah.
But listen, the money is not the end goal.
Okay.
The way that we think is flawed. And it's not like make us wrong flawed. Okay. It's not going to help us get to the promised land flawed. And that's the thing. It's like, it's not just that it moved the goalposts, which they do, but that's just one part of the conversation. Before the goalposts was a house, picket fence, 2.3 children. And so then we had an opportunity to receive that. And we're like, okay, well, why is it not working? Well, they didn't tell you how to keep the marriage together.
And a college degree, don't forget that, the degree.
Yeah, and the degree. So like, don't get me wrong. I think that money and wealth, and whatever that number is in terms of money and wealth, I think that's important, but there are more important and essential elements that we must be mindful of. Because if we don't have those other essential elements, then any money or wealth that we call ourselves acquiring or pursuing, we will never be able to grasp and hold on to. So like we have to learn how to advance our thinking before we hit our benchmark.
Ooh, okay.
If you don't have $100,000 or $1 million mentality, by the time you get there, then you won't be able to keep it. So what you had was then the drive or maybe the ambition to get there, but that's not the end point. That's the beginning point. Yeah. And that's why we keep missing the mark, because we think our end, we think the beginning is our end.
Wow. Do you see this, attorney? Let me ask you this, because I know what popular narrative says, and I kind of know what I've seen in my own life too. Is it your sense that when parents have struggled their whole life, that they in turn think that it's perfectly fine for their children to struggle, and that if their children ain't struggling, and then the kid's gonna be like messed up in life? Is that what you've seen?
No, it's the opposite for us, for Black folk. Okay. Let me tell you all this. Don't be offended. Forget it. Just
no, we
be offended. I don't care. I don't care if you're offended.
I was about to say, what are we doing here? Since when have you ever prefaced the statement with "Don't be offended"?
You know me now. Is that simply read? If you don't know, listen. It's the opposite.
Tell me more.
Listen, first off, let me give them this background for people who don't know me.
Okay.
You know, like, I don't think anyone, certainly not in the Chicagoland area, I don't know anyone. I don't think anyone has sat before more Black folk than me. Because I've been, for the last 10, 12 years straight, that's pretty much all I do, is that I counsel primarily African-American individuals and families to find, with respect to financial issues, buying a home, selling a home, foreclosure, bankruptcy, estate planning, that's all I've been doing. So, you know, I met tens of thousands of people up close and personal, right?
Okay.
So let me tell you this, and I did a post this morning. First off, you and I know, don't start, ladies, don't start with me. First off, we all know that most households in the African-American community are headed by Black women. Yeah. And the majority of those households are single Black women.
Yeah.
So those are the ones who will primarily walk through the door. First and foremost, let's understand that it's the Black woman who is laying the foundation sort of for our financial education or strategy. That's number one. And that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yep.
And the Black woman, let's talk about women. What's a woman's initial instinct? You're a mother. So what's your instinct?
Well, protect.
To protect your child. So a woman will go to great lengths. So she'll throw money out the window. She will throw practicality out the window to protect her child, especially if it's her baby boy who's 35 and living in the basement.
Oh, see, this is what I'll be talking about. So,
yes,
because you've made these posts before, and I have a son. He's 7. He's about to be 8, and I know that what you're saying is true, even though it bothers the shit out of me. I'm just like, I'm so aggravated by this post, but I know that there's fact there, and that's why, of course, you know, he has a father, and that's why his father's role is important, because the things that my son will do for his father, he won't do for me.
Right.
And the things that his father won't do for him to kind of build him up, I'm quick to do. Like, I'm like, oh my God, baby, you hot on the football field? Let's cancel football. You hot? Like, I'm just ready to throw everything away.
The coach should have given you another cup of Gatorade.
I'm like, the coach just cursed at you? I was like, no, he didn't. And so I've had to like literally be like, Danielle, it's okay. Like, his father's not gonna let nothing bad happen to him. But that instinct is powerful. Like,
but let me tell you about that instinct though. And I don't want to take, you said you didn't know
and it's deadly.
Where the conversation would go. But here's the deal. I had to learn this. Sisters are doing what sisters are supposed to do. You're supposed to protect your child. So on the one hand, I get upset when I see Black women coddling, literally, I'm not making this up, their 30, 35, 40-year-old sons who are living off of their mama and her kindness. And it's happening every day, all day long.
Yeah.
In one form or the other. And I guarantee you, everybody who's listening, just about everyone who's listening can point to a brother or a cousin or an uncle who fits this mold. Are you following?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, but listen, sister, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, I would never want to change the dynamic or the makeup of you. It's not even possible because you were created to be that protector in that regard. So the breakdown is not in you. The breakdown is of us as a family unit. That's the breakdown. And so I even have to check myself because I come up there. The men always ask, why do you come so hard at the brothers? Because I'm like, I expect that from a woman. What is she going to do? So I'll try to course correct, like at least just stop calling him baby. Yeah. I just need you to stop referring to him as a baby and he's 25 and having sex and drinking. I just need you to start right there. That's all I'm asking. You follow what I'm saying?
So I like the way that you phrase that because, there's the popular rhetoric now is that, Black women are like to blame for everything. Black women are evil. We the devil. We're especially single Black women. But I like how you phrase that, this is what women do. And I think I agree. Like this is every mother I know is like this is what we do.
You can't.
But the balancing part is what's missing a lot of times.
That's so big of an ask. It's almost an impossible ask.
Yeah.
That's like, me, I know who I am. I'm real clear on me. I'm a lion, right? So I'm like, all right, you got a problem? You want a problem solver? Call me, because I'm going to solve your problem for you. But then okay, and that's who I am at the core of me. And don't get me wrong, then I have to turn it off sometimes and I have to be soft. I have to, I've got to stroke the back of her head. But I'm like, but at the core of me, I'm a lion. So you can't be mad at me when, something occurs and I turn around like, oh, okay, I'm about to bite your neck off.
Right.
You follow? And that's why it takes family. So that's why it takes a man and a woman. That's why it takes yin and yang. That's why it takes grandmama and granddaddy and brothers and sisters. And so the foundation to any conversation that we'll have, at the root, at the essence of it all is the family. It's that structure. And so if we double back to the whole conversation about money, so then how could you expect, same with the sister, right? How can I expect you, Black boy, went to college, received your master's degree, started your small business and, worked your way up to making six figures? How do I expect you to do that? Not be in union with a woman, a Black woman in particular, and then to keep it, first off, make it. That's number one.
Right.
First off, have the mindset to make it. Start right there. 2, then actually do it. Then 3, then actually hold on to it without a premature death or incarceration or conviction for whatever reason. And then 4, do it within the context of a union, which is necessary in order to have some happiness and peace with that success. And then 5, transfer it to your kids. Good luck with that. Give me 10 examples of you that you know.
I don't have any examples.
Are you following what I'm saying?
In real life, I can't. I can think of the first 2 or 3 steps. Like, okay, mindset, yeah, made it happen, yeah, got it done. But the transfer,
the protection
and transfer,
yeah, to make it to the end. Did Red Fox make it to the end? You know what I'm saying? Bill Cosby, did he make it to the? Will he make it to the end?
It ain't looking like it.
Like how are you following? Like how many of us actually even make it to the end and then transfer? Okay. So it's like, I think, so just to bring it home in terms of the conversation. So and I'm working on it. Let's be clear here. We're all part of this process. It's like, all right, many of us have quote unquote made it. But we need to rephrase this thing. We need to reframe and define what made it
means. Okay.
We need to add on to that and just say, we made it to the starting line.
Yeah.
We're just starting.
Do you think is that realization is so painful that so many people just don't want to admit it to themselves?
That's what it is.
That's especially because I know women, we have issues too, but I know for men, I think the ego be the stopping point. Is like, how you gonna tell me I'm just getting started? I done did this and this. My father wasn't even in the household. My father didn't have a job. My father was not but all of that is kind of like
the baseline.
That's all the baseline.
Yeah.
But it's like we have so much trauma that we look at all the things that we've overcome and we're like, oh, we've accomplished it. And then to hear somebody like you come in and say, well, yeah, you're kind of at step 1. I can imagine that conversation don't go over very well.
Now, let me help Black folk out, and then I have to remember one thing. I'll write it down.
Okay.
TD Jake said it.
Okay.
But I learned something with my first year of law school, right? And it's that this is to reconcile those two things.
Okay.
So after my first year of law school, here I am. I'm from Chicago State University. Lord, right? Like,
and you went to Harvard, right? Just so people know.
Like 10th tier. You know what I mean? Chicago State, not even on the map.
You said 10th tier.
Like junior college. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
So as my wife said, like I was at the top of the bottom. I was at the top of the bottom.
That's a good analogy. Yep.
The Negro experience. The Negroes, even if those of us at the top are at the bottom. So we're at the top of the bottom and we're bragging like we made it.
Ooh, somebody tweet that. That's we need to let me write that down. Hold on, top of the bottom.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings because it's okay to be at the top of the bottom because that's really not necessarily the race. That's not the defining. So this guy helped put it in perspective for me after my first year of law. Well, within my first year of law school, and I'll never forget it. We were standing outside, and he came up to me. His name was Rory, in fact. And then he was like, "Hey, Fenton, I'm flipping through. I forgot what it's called. This is like the introductory book of all the different students, and they'd have where you went to undergrad, where you graduated. And it's like 20% graduated from Harvard, 20% graduated from Columbia, 10% from Princeton, 10% from Yale. They have a formula, right? And then they have some throw-ins, and I was one of the throw-ins.
Like affirmative action.
Yeah, well, whatever. They're affirmative action too, because they make sure they pull 20% from Harvard. They make sure they pull 10%. So we're all affirmative action. It's just a formula. Okay. So I'm no different than their affirmative action, right? So he looks at me and then he's like, Chicago State. He was like, bruh, I tried to look up Chicago State. He's like, bruh, I don't know how you got here. But hold on one second. And this is the Negro experience. So he's like, he said, you know what, man? He was like, but all of the people that are here, he said, of all of them, I am most impressed by you. Right? And he said, this is why. I never forgot this. He said, because it is not where you are. It is not where you are. It is not where you are in terms of 100,000 or 200 or 1 million or 10 million. He said, it is the distance traveled.
Okay.
So I don't look at myself standing next to the others and saying, well, my firm did this, or I make X and they make Y. I look at where did you start and where are you standing? Where did I start and where am I standing? Okay, that's who won the race.
I like that.
So from that standpoint, we are winning. So if we start racing them according to their terms, we will always lose because they'll always, quote unquote, be ahead of us. But if we really gauge the race and look at who's winning, we've traveled the longest distance.
Absolutely.
We carry the heaviest load. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean that where we stand, we should be in contentment.
Okay. Because
although we have traveled a greater distance than them, our gauge is not a comparison to them. That's where we mess up.
Trying to compare. Okay. All right. So I want to go back to the post that you made on Facebook about basically not leaving your children with a GoFundMe. And I don't remember it verbatim, but I know it started with get $1 million life insurance policy. Yes. Can we break that down?
Yeah. So all of this whole empowerment and whatever, yes, we have to get some foundation because money is a part of it, right? Yep. So I was speaking of what folk call estate planning, which I like to call life planning.
Life planning, okay.
I like to call it legacy planning.
Okay.
And I like to call it, if you love your child the way that you say you love your child, do something about it planning.
Attorney, let's talk about that last statement for a minute, because I have said that before and people kind of lose their shit when I say that. I'm like, listen, if you care about your children the way that you say, and if you really want better for them, and if you really are about this life, like there's no excuse not to at least do, have a life insurance policy. Yeah. What kind of response do you get when you say that to people?
Well, most people, I say that to, they understand and know me. So they are typically, but I think most folks get it. But then the ones who don't, I think they just push back. And then we come with the excuses. as to why we can't do something. Or the most famous, the most famous one is I didn't know. Well, you know now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So back to this life planning, which I like that term a lot. So what would be the first step for that?
So as an example, and I'll just jump. Well, everyone needs the basics. The basic is a property power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. Like anyone above the age of 18 years of age, it's not even a need, it's a requirement. It's a requirement that you have a healthcare power of attorney and a property power of attorney. Essentially, healthcare property power of attorney gives someone else is an agent to do something. To do something is to make decisions on your behalf. With respect to healthcare, is to make healthcare decisions. With respect to property powers of attorney, is to make property decisions. But here's the thing. A lot of folk think they don't need it because, one, they may be married, and that's not true. If you're married, you still need it. Because
really?
Yeah, of course. Because if a person is married, right, they're not, let's say they have separate bank accounts. Can you, husband, walk into the bank where your wife has an account with only her name on it and tell the teller that you want to make a withdrawal? Can you go to your wife's job and say to HR and say, hey, HR, I'd like to redirect her direct deposit? So we all know you can't. Can you walk into her physician's office and say, I'd like to see my wife's medical records? No. So being married, still does not excuse you from having a power of attorney.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because I didn't know that. Everybody thinks being married is like the golden ticket and you don't got to do nothing else.
It is not.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay.
And then here's the other part of it. Everybody's not married to someone they want making decisions as their first line of defense.
This is why you be getting in trouble.
It's not true. Is that not true?
No comment. I'm not married anymore, so I'm no comment.
Of course. Come on now. I'm looking right at the camera. Let me look right at somebody's soul. Let me look at your soul. You know you don't want your husband messing around with your money. That man can't budget his checkbook. He has $500 in his account. So you think that's the guy you want managing the finances if you're sick in the hospital? Wow. That guy?
So these things right here, I get why people put this off for so long, because it forces you to face the reality of the decisions that you've made with your life. And that might not be pretty.
That's it.
That might not be pretty.
That's
it.
To
know that you're married to somebody that if you die, you don't want them to have your money. Like that's a bad feeling.
That's it. Or that, how many people, this is heart wrenching. I see this happen oftentimes. This is what really gets me, is when older people come in and I'm like, okay, Ms. Johnson, who would you like to, make medical decisions on your behalf if you can't, or to handle your financial affairs? And she'll pause and say, well, I don't know, Attorney Fenton. And I'm like, wow. You know how many, that's like 20%, 25% of us. We're like, maybe we'll have one person. But how many of us can strongly say, oh yeah, this person is first, that person is second. Matter of fact, make that person third. Very few of us.
Very few. All right, so property power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, even if you're married.
Even if you're married. And if you have a child above the age of 18, you need one for your children because they're independent.
Okay.
So how many folk out here have children who are 22, 23, out on their own, even in college? You need powers of attorney for your children. What if they're in college and they're renting a place, right? And something happens and you need to go wherever they are and, get inside their apartment or handle something related to their bank account. You cannot.
Wow.
So you need powers of attorney for your children.
Wow. Over 18. Okay.
Over
Didn't know
18.
That either.
And your mama. If you love it, this is my favorite one, your mama. That's what I do this broadcast all the time. I'll be like, I love doing that one. Your mama, I used to have a segment. This is like your mama. And I say your mama for like 10 minutes straight. People are like, why is Attorney Fenton just talking about people's mama? Because I'm like, if I start talking about your mama, I'm going to get their attention.
You go get their attention.
2 places. This is how I get people's attention. I start talking about your kids. I start talking about your kids, or I start talking about your mama. And I know I got Black folks' attention.
All right, so you guys, if you're just tuning in, I'm Danielle Pierce. I'm talking to attorney Ernest Fenton. He is out of Chicago. He is a phenomenal attorney, and as he wears a lot of different hats, I should say. So it's not just about the law, right? It's also about everything else that goes into
it's about life.
So we're talking today about how to make sure your kids don't have to set up a GoFundMe when we die, right? Not if, when we die. And we talked about the first two steps. What else would you say after that?
All right, let's talk about trust, something that we don't talk about. But I'll start off by we will have the discussion of trust by beginning with the discussion of wills.
Okay.
And let me just clarify something. Like, this conversation is not about you dying. Like, we're not planning for your demise. What we are doing is planning for your life, and what we are doing is planning for your legacy. Right? So let me put that in greater context. A healthcare power of attorney, as well as a property power of attorney, they are only good while you are living. So most people, they say estate planning, they say it must be when I'm dead. But no, because everything that we've talked about up to this point, healthcare power of attorney and a property power of attorney, they are only valid while you are living. When a person dies, both of those instruments are void.
Okay.
That's something else. How many people have a property power of attorney and they think that it's going to be used after their grandmother passes? So they have it, I went to Office Max and bought a property power of attorney for $20. And then I don't want to pay an attorney $300. I want to pay $20 and do it myself. And so they bought a property power of attorney. And what they don't get is that you're not buying the paper, you're buying the information. And so the information is, hey, a property power of attorney is going to unfortunately be void after your grandmother passes. So after she passes, you walk into the bank knowing that she has $25,000 in her savings account, and you think you're going to use that money for her burial. And then you present the power of attorney and they tell you, I'm sorry, sir, but your grandmother's passed. This is no longer good.
Wow. And you've seen that happen before?
All the time. Almost every month someone calls me, well, I have a power of attorney. Okay, I hate to break the bad news, but you can't use that to access the funds in her account because she's already passed.
Wow.
Okay, so now they end up in probate, spending thousands of dollars because we tried to save a couple of $100.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about a trust beginning with the will. So a will is like old school. What's old school dance? Like the bump, the grind, the funky chicken. That's all a will. So if you're using a will, you're doing the funky chicken. Whenever you go out, I just want you to know you're doing the funky chicken.
I was about to say the Tootsie Roll.
The Tootsie Roll. You're doing the Tootsie Roll. Not the Cabbage Patch. You passed the Cabbage Patch. Cabbage Patch was in the 80s. You way back in the 60s. So here's a will is antiquated. It's like utilizing a payphone or doing the Tootsie Roll, at a club. And the reason that is antiquated is because there's new technology that exists that is much better than a will, much better than a payphone. Like much better than a payphone is the highest form of technology is something called a smartphone. So not only can I make a phone call, on this smartphone the same as I can with a payphone, but I can also take photos with this smartphone. I can also record myself on the smartphone. I can also do banking transactions on the smartphone. So, and I can be on a plane with the smartphone, land in another country with it, right? So how does that relate to a will as opposed to the new smartphone, which is a trust? The trust is a smartphone. A will is a payphone. How so? Well, one, a will's only value is to distribute gifts or your assets when you die. That's the only thing a will does. So a will is only good when you die. So who wants to do a will? Because it is only good when you die. So it's the benefit of the will is only for people who will survive you. So that's number one. Well, two, a will is also good for anyone who has a minor child. So to that extent, a will is beneficial in this regard, because if you are single, even if you're married, the one bit of value that a will has currently is that in a will, you can name who you desire to be the guardian of any minor child. So if you have a minor child, you got to get a will only to name who you want to be guardian, but not to give away assets. That's not what it's for.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So remember that one.
Got it.
But you can also name who you desire to be guardian of your minor child in a property power of attorney.
Okay.
So another reason you should have a property power of attorney, because you can say, hey, if something happens to me, if Danielle becomes ill, this is the person. Not only do I want this person to manage my finances, but I also want this person to become guardian of any minor child. And
so the will is technically good for one thing then, if you can get, wow.
Correct. Yes. Okay.
Got it.
So now let's get to new technology. New technology is something called the trust. It's like the smartphone. The beauty of the trust is that it does everything that a will does and more. The smartphone does everything that a payphone does, and then 100 times more. So one of the mores is this: a trust also may serve to protect your assets while you are living. See, as an example, in Illinois, as I'd imagine in other jurisdictions, I'll only speak to Illinois. In Illinois, any judgment that is entered against you automatically becomes a lien on any real asset that you own, real estate. So if a judgment is entered against you because you defaulted on credit cards, let's say $10,000, they're going to put a lien not just on your primary home, but on all 3, 4, 5 of your investment properties in that jurisdiction. And if you have investment properties outside of that jurisdiction, let's say you have 5 properties in Illinois, 2 in Indiana, 3 in Texas. So automatically the lien will attach to the properties in Illinois where the judgment was entered. But then too, a savvy attorney such as myself, I'd find out where else you have properties, and then I would ratify, if you will, that judgment in those other jurisdictions. It'll be an extra step, but I'll take that extra step to also place liens on your properties across the country.
Wow. And this is for properties that are owned in an individual's name. Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. As an example.
Okay.
So one of the things we want to do is to make certain that we don't own stuff. I did a video before, a little broadcast, to say it's called Rich Folk, Po Folk. Rich Folk.
Wait, where can people find this at? Because I know people are going to be asking. So where should they go to get more?
I don't know where that was at. I think it's on my podcast.
Okay. What's the name of the podcast?
My podcast, attorneyernestfenton.podomatic.com.
Podomatic. Okay. Yeah. I'll type that in the comments.
Yeah, or go to my website. But I don't know where I did this video. I think it was on Facebook. I'll let you send it or whatever.
Okay.
But I did this little blurb. It's called Rich Folk, Po Folk. See, Po folk like to own stuff.
That was on Facebook when you was.
Yes, that's on Facebook.
That was on Facebook. I remember that one. But go ahead, I'm listening because let's get the people.
And then they gotta be like, who is this guy? Po folk like to own stuff. Hear me. Rich folk like to control stuff. See, po folk like to elect presidents. Rich folk like to control presidents.
Ooh, I can't even get this down fast enough. This is so good. So good.
Are you following me? So yes. What I'm saying is that's why, going back to the beginning of the conversation, I said it is not about the money. Because I don't care how much money we get. If you have a po folk mentality, we're not going to keep it. It's irrelevant. I don't care if you get a black president. Because if you don't have a rich man's mentality to control that president, it's irrelevant that you had a black president. Are you following me?
Understood. Yeah, I know you catch a lot of flack for Obama too about what you said about him.
But see, you see how we fight? We fight our own salvation.
All the time.
I'm trying to take it to the promised land. Yeah. And it's not, we take it as a personal attack against Obama. I'm like, no, I'm not attacking Obama. I'm trying to attack that mindset that we have. See, we want to just get along. We just want to go along to get along. That's a poor man's mentality. Rich folk don't show up just to get along. Rich folk show up to get stuff. Yep. We just show up to say we were there. You know, I'm not showing up anywhere. Don't invite me anywhere. If nothing is there for me, don't invite me. I'm not coming.
Wow.
So the poor mentality is we just want to own stuff. So we love saying, oh, Danielle, I own 5 houses. Danielle, have you ever heard me say I own anything?
I have never heard you say
that you own anything. Have I ever posted anything saying what I own? Have you ever heard me brag about anything?
I have never, except for your wife. You brag about her?
That's
about
it. That's it. Me. You follow what I'm saying?
That's it.
I'm just like, so one of the mindsets that we have to break, and I understand. It's like we have to fall out of love of owning stuff. And we have to quote, or not even fall in love, but if we're going to fall in love with anything in terms of assets, so to speak, then we have to fall in love with the understanding that it's really about the control that we establish. And so we don't want stuff in our name, because when things are in your name, they're easy to attack. So if you tell me what your weakness is, then I can tell you how I can defeat you. So so if your weakness is, hey, I own this real estate and I'm proud. So then if I get a judgment, or if I threaten your ownership, then you're most likely to bend, if not break. So ownership. So we don't want stuff in your name. So how do we make it such that you don't own stuff, that you can get into the control mindset? Well, rich folk control. How? The question is begged. How do rich folk control things? Well, they control things through corporations and trusts.
Understood. Corporations and trusts.
They control things through corporations and trusts. Now, here's the thing. When you transfer, as an example, I'll skip. I know you have a sophisticated audience. When you transfer assets from your individual name into a corporation or a trust, you no longer own that asset. The trust owns that asset. The corporation owns that asset. I'm pausing. I'm breaking. But you may own the corporation or the trust.
Understood.
All right. And don't go around bragging about the corporation you own either. Keep that quiet. Give an example, Donald Trump, release your tax returns. No, I will not release my tax returns, because his returns will tell you his interests in various corporations and trusts. He doesn't want you to know, for good reason. So now he's susceptible, because if you understand where my value rests from a financial standpoint, it's easier for you to attack me. But if you attack me, you don't know where my walls are. If you don't know my strength, then you don't know what you're attacking.
So I want to do a quick personal story too, because this ties into some information that you shared with me probably a year and a half or so ago, just over Messenger, nothing even formal. But I went to an estate, a life planning attorney here in Texas, and I got what I thought was all these documents done. I got the POAs, the will, the trust, and I thought everything was great. I was like, okay, cool. I'm ready to die for the very first time. I, in turn, then ran across another attorney who specializes in life planning, and that's her thing. That's all she does.
Right.
She looked at my first set of documents and was like, I have some concerns. And she went through, and essentially I had to pay twice for my documents, because the first time was done by an attorney who kind of dabbled in the area, which is why I always say I don't like people who dabble, because I feel like they waste my time and yours. So she was dabbling. So I got something, but it definitely was not. I have a Series LLC, which that came from your recommendation. I set that up. Nothing in there about that. Nothing in there about passing down percentages of the value in the trust, and and staggering it so that the kids don't get like $1 million when they turn 21. The first attorney didn't know how to do all of that stuff, but the second attorney did. So when he's telling you don't go to Staples and buy that stuff and don't go to LegalZoom, it is a very real thing, because had I died with that first set in place, I would be, it still had to go through probate. That was the whole point of me going through this whole process. She just did it all the way,
and no restrictions, no benefits, no legacy planning.
Nothing.
So
it was no legacy planning.
You could have just made whomever beneficiaries of your accounts, and it could have been the end of it.
Yeah, and I paid $1,200 for that. So I had to pay another $2,500 to get it done the right way by an actual attorney. So I'm telling you guys, make sure that you go to someone who specializes in this area, and they don't just dabble. And then I would say get a second or third opinion too, right? Would you agree with that?
And that was my first sign that you went to the wrong person, because it was $1,200. If you would have told me, I should have just said, how much did they charge you? $1,200. Oh, okay.
So I'm going back to meet with her, but now she mad at me because I done figured out that she gave me the wrong shit. So now she mad at me, and I'm just like, well, you could have just said that you weren't, experienced enough to pull this off. But I think attorneys, just like everybody else out here, they need money too. A lot of them, so they'll just take the money and keep it moving.
And a lot of us, quote unquote, we don't know any better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Attorneys are people too.
Yep.
So I'm telling you this, like that's a whole nother conversation. A lot of attorneys don't know. They don't know any better. That's one, but they lack the integrity. Like they should know better. They should know enough to say, well, this may be over my head. So to that extent, but they don't know.
Yeah.
You
So
know.
just a disclaimer, make sure you find an actual person who's skilled in this area. But okay, we did the POAs and then the trust. And then for the trust, like when people say, okay, I want to establish a trust, what's the first step? Because I know that question is in the comments.
Yeah, but let me remember that. But let me stay on what you just said because it was critical.
Okay.
You talked about two things. One thing that you talked about is the necessity to create the trust, to execute a trust such that it is in conformity with your desires. Yeah. And in most of our cases, and in your case, clearly, is to create a legacy.
Yeah.
So what Danielle was saying is like, she was saying, well, the payments in my trust were not staggered. Yep. What she meant was like, let's set as an example, if she sets up a trust, not only can this trust hold assets that you have today, i.e. real estate, so we could have transferred any real estate that you have in your name into the trust. Yeah. Maybe not all, but that's a bigger conversation. Let's say we chose to transfer your primary residence into the trust. In most instances, however, I would not recommend that you transfer investment properties directly into your primary trust, because whatever you place into the trust, if the trust burns down, it's going to burn down everything inside, or whatever's outside of the trust that could potentially be a risk for what's in the trust. We want to keep those things separate. So I want to keep your business separate from your personal. So your trust is your mothership. So I may transfer your primary residence into the trust, but all your investments, I want to use corps. And then the connection between the bridge that you mentioned or alluded to, the bridge between your trust and your corp is that perhaps your trust could be the owner of your corpse, but we won't place those assets in the trust. So if your corpse are attacked, they'll be attacking the corpse and not your trust.
Yeah, first attorney she didn't know about any of that stuff.
I know. Many don't.
Yeah, didn't know about any of that stuff.
And that's funding. That's funding your trust.
Funding the trust. Okay. All right. So I don't want to confuse people too much. So we're back to where were we at? POAs, the trust. What's the first step to the trust? What do people do? How much money do they need? Who should they call? Can they call you?
Yeah, you can call me. Yeah, they can call. You can call me. You can call me. I'll direct people. Okay. Check me out on social media, my podcast. But you can call me 708. You'll give the number 991-7268. You'll give the number.
I'm gonna put a link in the comments for people to reach out to you.
Call me. Okay. So one is, you just mentioned it. Find someone who's competent. You know, so like if you're in Illinois, I can help you. If you're in other states as well, or at least direct you in the right place. Georgia, I can work with. New York, I can work with. Right? Indiana, I can work with. So, and the cost of a trust, it depends. I mean, not a trust. The cost of estate planning depends. At the most base level, a base level is like, I don't own real estate. And that's another question. I don't own real estate. I have a small child. I do have some assets. In the near future, I expect to have more assets. I want to go ahead and set up this trust now and then use it as I grow, right? On the base level, you may be like $1,500 to $2,000. That's like vanilla. And at the top, if it's a family, it's over $5,000.
Understood.
And it's worth it. It's worth every dollar. And the other part of it is, especially for business people, I know a lot of business people are following you. If you're in business, if you have a family, you have children, especially if you have, well, any children, but Lord forbid, if you have two children with two different partners, you gotta set this up because one of your children may be disinherited. If you have a child, if you have a blended family, if you don't set this up, Matt, I'm gonna set this scenario to take you off course. We talk about single parent households. So here's a woman, she had a child, the majority of our households. Well, she gets married 10, 15 years later. Maybe she bring in a stepchild. So husband, wife, he has a child, she has a child. Maybe they have one together. Well, if there's no estate planning and there's no trust, he who is standing last receives the gold, as an example, potentially, depending on how things are set up. But so it's possible that if the wife predeceases the husband and the husband inherits everything that they created, depending on how it's set up, and then the husband passes by law, when the husband passes, what he has will go to his biological children. So a lot of people are being disinherited, especially in our community, because we have blended families and we're not doing any planning.
That is a whole nother segment that you just dropped right there, because the blended family thing on social media, popular narrative is, oh, it's great. You know, there's no such thing as step. There's no such thing as half around here. This, that, and the third. But then when it hits the fan, which it always does, then you know, you see how things shake out. So you're telling me that if you don't take these proper steps, that the children who you claim to love is your own, right? May not receive what you want them to receive because things aren't in place.
Correct.
Ooh, child.
Yeah. So I mean, so like, and this is something that I say, like, you know, I repeat to myself, I say to you, I'll say to everybody, it's like, if we really want to create wealth, and not just the dollar wealth is important, but like the mindset of wealth, like the comfort of wealth. Because really, I think the wealth is the stability and the comfort in knowing like we can feed and clothe ourselves and have some of the niceties of life. Yeah. Right? Like, to the point where we're just not worried, like we don't have to, what's the name, title of this? Like, we don't have to do GoFundMe to bury grandma. I think wealth is just knowing if something happens to my mother, no matter what she has, I'm not stressed over a $15,000 funeral. That's wealth for me. I can go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it begins with the mindset. So like, we first must establish the mindset and then the money will come.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true about this and everything else. But I like what you said earlier, way back in the beginning when we first started talking. When we were talking about wills, you said, of course, wills are old school. Having a will is like using a payphone, mm-hmm. But also that wills are for people when they die. So that's why so many, like I know my grandma, like. Yeah. There's no conversation gonna be had about no wills or no plans or nothing without getting cursed out, and that's the popular narrative. But if we change our understanding of what's happening, like we're not just planning for you to die, grandma, we're planning for all the 60, 70 siblings, grandchildren, great grands, and all of that. Then that's a different conversation. I would hope would yield a different response. I ain't trying to get my grandma.
Hold on, grandma. I'm planning so that the nursing home doesn't take your house. Yeah. Because grandma, if the house is in your name and for whatever reason, if we had to place you in a nursing home or your granddaddy had to be placed in a nursing home, I want you to know that the nursing home will require that you sell the house so that we can cover the costs, or otherwise they're going to put a lien on it. So what you worked a lifetime for, you don't have to worry about us getting it because they're going to get it.
How fast can someone lose? Because I think this will put this in perspective for a lot of people. If you guys are just tuning in, talking to attorney Ernest Fenton, he's out of Chicago. He is willing to help those who he's able to residing in states where he's able to work with them, or also refer people out. I'll drop a link to that information in the comments. But like, subscribe, share the video. That would be awesome. How fast have you seen a person's entire life savings dissipate after they die? Like, what's one of the worst scenarios that you can think of? And I know you have so many of them, but what comes to mind?
Those people never come back. They just sort of dissipate. But let me tell you this story. So I don't know, but I had a client. This is one of my more interesting stories. I have to write this, do it a book.
Okay.
So it was a guy. He worked at Ford, and this was like 7-8 years ago. Okay. And his daughter comes into my office, and she didn't appear to be well-to-do or whatever the case may be. And she was like, "Hey, Attorney Fenton, the state took my daddy, and they won't release him to us. It was like 4 or 5 siblings. They won't release him to us, and they're trying to steal his money. He has $1 million." And she was an around the way girl, and I'm looking at her like, "Huh? Your daddy got $1 million?" So I was a little bit leery, but she was well spoken. But I was like, huh? It didn't make sense to me. So she was like, well, on the weekends, they'll let us take him out. I'll bring him. We'll schedule a meeting. And I'm like, huh? So short of it is, she returns. Sure enough, a week or two later, with one other of her sisters and her father. And he had on some old coveralls, and he was a little sniffed. He maybe in his 80s, just little battered, unkept man, his hair and whatever else, right? And I'm looking at him like, you had $1 million? This is like 10 years ago. And this is the beginning of me learning about all the millionaires next door in our community, which there are a lot of them. And you'd be shocked at the ones who really have the money. It ain't the fancy lawyers and doctors and the people with the MBAs. It's that old school guy who had the rib house. It's that guy who worked at the factory for all those years, and he was consistent, and he had the same sofa for the last 30 years. Those are the people in our community with the money. So anyhow, so he comes in and they tell me the story. So essentially what happened is he lived alone. I think he was late 70s, early 80s. He had been retired for 30 or 40 years. His wife had passed. I think she had a pension as well. I believe he was receiving her pension. He was in retirement at least for about 30 years.
Wow.
So he lived in the same house. He had no mortgage. He had paid off his mortgage over 30 years ago. The short of it is his pension has been dropping into his account for over 30 years.
Wow.
The man had no bills.
Wow.
And the man had $1 million.
Wow.
And the neighbors saw him like at the front door, and he looked a little disheveled or whatever the case may be, and they would like look in on him. He was a hoarder. So he had newspapers and other stuff stacked up in his place, and had a stench to it. Yep. And they called the police because they were concerned. Well, the police called the public guardian. The public guardian took him into custody. I see that often. That's happening a lot. So grandmama, granddaddy, somebody calls the police. Oh, elder abuse. Huge, huge. Wow. So they take him into custody. Now they won't release him. They commit him to an institution. So now we have to go through the court system. And guess what they do? They take control of his account in his name. That's why you want trust. That's why you want other things. Because if it were in the trust, they probably wouldn't have known. But they tracked him because they could track you through your Social Security or whatever way they found. The daughter first came in, they say, they trying to take my daddy and spend all his money. I'm like, what is she talking about? Short of it is they were spending $15,000 a month. I think they had him for 3 months. They had blown through about $45,000 in 3 months.
Of his money.
Of his money.
Of his money.
And didn't want to release him.
Wow. It's a dirty game out here.
It's dirty.
It's almost like, I don't know, we're going to wrap up soon, but it's almost like I was thinking about Prince and how they say he died intestate and didn't have all his stuff together. And Prince was like, seemed like a revolutionary, like an activist. Like and it's like, so you could work your whole life and trying to fight against the system and fight against the man and not allow yourself to be subjected to certain things. But if you don't take those final, that like you said, the last 10%, if you don't wrap that up tight, then your whole life just unravels.
Yep.
Wow.
And that's the next level for us. You follow? That's the stuff that I'm pushing for. That's the stuff that I'm fighting for. It's like for all the people, you made it to the job. You made it to the degree. You made it to the 6 figures. Guess what? I hate to break the bad news. You're just starting.
Yeah.
Now we have to really do some work. They say, Biggie told you. He said, more money, more problems. When you have money, I spend as much time thinking, planning, strategizing on how to preserve what I have as I do in trying to get something more. Another one of our mistakes is that everybody's trying to get more. I'm like, no. If you have something, the first thing you need to do is secure what you have before you try to go out and get something else. That's the mistake that we are making in our community. I'm telling you.
Wow. So it sounds like, it sounds like for people who are working that job that they say that they hate and they're getting, maybe they have a 401k match or there's benefits to the job, and we're just kind of dismissing those jobs. We need to instead leverage and utilize those jobs properly, because according to what you said earlier, that's the game changer if you plan it the right way, and not the people on social media, everybody, you should be an entrepreneur, make $1 million like me, and not those people, right?
Good luck. Both of them. You must have read another post of mine because I said that the whole, you know what it takes? It takes both of us.
Yeah.
We have to leverage that because like retirement accounts, they have value. And most entrepreneurs, unless you get to a very mature stage of entrepreneurship, and how many people in our community particularly make it to that level or stage where we have enough excess cash and we have the diligence to set up retirement accounts.
I just did it in the last year and a half, and I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years.
And then fund it. You follow what I'm saying? And then fund it because now you're the boss. You have to make the funding decision, and then fund it. The beauty of a retirement account, and you're matching yourself. So if you have a spouse or a partner and, they have a 401k or a matching program, you need to max that out. Or like, this is between you and I, like you're an entrepreneur, you have some control on over your income, but a person with the W-2, they may not have as much control. You determine if you make $30,000 this year or $100,000 this year. Sometimes when you have an opportunity to make $100,000 this year, it may be smart to only make $30,000 this year. So you have less of a tax planning issue than perhaps someone who is a W-2 employee who makes six figures. They have less control over it. But what we can control is, well, let's go ahead and max out their retirement account that I can control. So like when you start working both of those things together, that's when you create quote unquote real wealth. It's a partnership.
Wow. This was so, I feel like we gotta do this again, because I know a question is gonna be crazy in the comments. So I'm gonna do a recap. I'm gonna post a link to reach out to you. Anything else you want people to know? Like, if there's one thing you could tell people, what would it be?
I'm just gonna say like buckle down and change the way that you think. And like, stop being so enamored about getting rich. Like, I think that's also a trap for Black people. Like, it's okay. A lot of us are going to get rich. That's not really a big deal. I know it sounds crazy, but it's not that big of a deal. What's most important is that we get stable.
I so love that, man.
Because if you get stable, we're not even stable when we're trying to get rich.
Yeah.
So even if you get rich from a financial standpoint, it's going to crumble because you're not stable. So we need to create stability in our businesses. We need to create stability in our finances and in the way that we think, in our social interactions. Mm-hmm. When we create stability and calm and a strategy, clear head, and to change the way we think, money ain't our problem.
I agree. Because the outside will always match the inside, right? Yeah. That's it. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll be back Thursday with another broadcast about something related to entrepreneurship, I'm sure. But in the meantime, sending you love, light, peace, blessings, grace, and clarity. And thank you so much, Attorney Fenton.
Peace.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.